On this Friday night, Israel bombs a convoy of ambulances in Gaza. Why Israel says it carried out the deadly attack and the refusal to pause the fighting, plus the new hope of getting fuel into Gaza. The guilt of not being in Gaza.
We want our family.
As those stuck there grow desperate to get out. And chaos from Ciarán. How this brutal storm is both a super soaker and a fire starter.
Global National with Farah Nasser.
Good evening. We begin with breaking news tonight. Global News has confirmed that Canadians stuck in Gaza could leave as early as Sunday, while civilian casualties there keep climbing every day. Israel is claiming responsibility for an airstrike on an ambulance convoy outside Gaza's largest hospital. And a warning, some of these images are disturbing. Israel says the convoy was transporting Hamas fighters. Gaza's Hamas-run health ministry says it was transporting critically wounded patients from Al-Shifa Hospital to the Rafah border crossing. According to that health ministry, more than 9,000 people in Gaza have been killed by Israeli airstrikes since October the 7th. Israel says that on that day, Hamas attacked and killed more than 1,400 people in southern Israel. The IDF says at least 23 Israeli soldiers have died. Today, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau reiterated calls for a break in fighting so that aid can get in and that people can get out. When that happens, the Egyptian government says those leaving Gaza through the Rafah border crossing will be allowed to stay in Egypt for 3 days.
We need a humanitarian pause. All the hostages need to be released. We need much more aid going to the Palestinian people, and we need innocent civilians to be protected.
The U.S. is echoing this. It's a subtle shift in tone in America's unequivocal support for Israel. In his third face-to-face since Israel's war on Hamas began, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken pushed Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu today for a humanitarian pause, something Netanyahu pushed back on. Mike Armstrong on the shifting U.S. strategy and the real-life consequences of Israel's actions in Gaza.
The lines in Gaza start at first light. Families queuing up for things like water or bread. But even in the desperation, the bigger concern is the fighting. We don't want food, says Hussein al-Nadi. We want a ceasefire. That's all. Now, the U.S. is making a similar call in person. The American Secretary of State touched down in Tel Aviv Friday, meeting the Israeli Prime Minister and the country's war cabinet. Antony Blinken pushed Israeli leaders to hold humanitarian pauses in the fighting. It would allow aid to get to Gazan civilians, he says, and make it easier to get the hostages held by Hamas back.
We believe that a humanitarian pause could help that effort.
Well, the appeal for restraint was rejected basically as soon as Blinken left the country. Benjamin Netanyahu says there will be no ceasefire until the hostages are freed. Israel, he said, will continue bombarding Gaza with, quote, all of its power.
Fuel is essential.
Now, UN officials say there may be progress on getting fuel into Gaza. Negotiations are underway to move diesel into the Strip to help keep generators running at hospitals and to help with the distribution of water. But the UN also says 72 of its staff members have been killed in Gaza, and the rest are struggling to do their jobs. Not enough aid is being allowed in.
We are effectively starved of the vital humanitarian supplies that we need to provide to people.
The conditions are also difficult for those sharing stories from Gaza. Journalists in the Strip buried a colleague Friday. This is Palestinian journalist Mohammed Abu Hattab reporting Thursday. He was later killed in an explosion at his home. His colleagues found out he was dead while live on air. An independent NGO that promotes press freedom says since October 7th, 36 journalists and media workers have been killed. Now, the cost of helping people in this conflict is rising. On October 12th, the UN said it would need about $300 million US to support 1.3 million people in Gaza and the West Bank through the end of the year. It now says it will have to help more than twice as many people, 2.7 million, and it will cost $1.2 billion, 4 times as much. Farah?
Mike Armstrong in Jerusalem, thank you. Israel's also on high alert along its northern border after Hezbollah's leader threatened to escalate attacks today. In his first speech since the conflict erupted, Hassan Nasrallah praised Hamas for its attack on October 7th and warned the world that fighting between Iran-backed militants and Israeli troops on the Lebanese front could spill over, saying, quote, "A total war is realistic unless Israel halts its assault on Gaza." Israel's retaliation on Hamas has not only decimated lives in Gaza, it's also affected those Gazans trying to make a living outside of it. Today, thousands of Palestinians who worked in Israel and in the occupied West Bank returned to Gaza. They were detained after the events of October 7th. Some say they were mistreated by Israeli authorities. Many had ID number tags attached to their leg and claim they were beaten. Palestinian workers can make 10 times more money in Israel than in Gaza. Around 18,000 people had permits to do so. Daniele Hamamdjian has a story of 2 fathers whose families have been ripped apart by this conflict.
Everybody here is glued to a phone for updates from Gaza. Which building was bombed? Did the children have something to eat today? Did the neighbors survive?
طبعا اكيد 100% لو بكره tomorrow انا go.
Gaza is where they wish they were. They're construction workers, farmers and waiters who live in the enclave but work throughout Israel to earn more money. Their permits were suspended on October 7th, leaving them with nowhere else to go. But 80 kilometers away in a sports complex in the West Bank, where many are consumed by the guilt of not suffering alongside their wives and children.
My wife at this time, she is the dad and the mother and every person for our children. Because I'm here, but my heart is in Gaza.
Tamir studied civil engineering but made a living waiting tables in northern Israel.
We are die. We don't want food. We don't want water. We want our family. Every night we all cry. All workers cry. Please visit us in the night today. So you see everyone cry with his family.
He keeps promising his children he'll take them to a restaurant, but all they want, they tell him, is a hug from their dad.
This is my family. Tala, the big daughter, and Lana, and the little one is Ahmad, my son, my heart.
Uriah, this is Yuval, and this is my daughter, Ofri.
And as the sun starts to set in Tel Aviv,
she just turned 10 and
another father is about to spend another night without his children and his wife.
I don't believe that they're evil over there. I think they want to live their lives just like I want to live my life. And conflicts are things that happen. So I have no sense of vengeance, revenge, nothing at all. I just want my family back. And I really wish for them to be united with their families as well.
Every day, Avichai Brodet stands outside the Israeli Ministry of Defense in protest and in desperation. His entire family is believed to be held hostage by Hamas.
I miss the mess they make, after they come back home from school. And I miss making them dinner. And I miss the mess they make after eating dinner. And I miss Yuval playing his Xbox. I miss them ruining my garden outside. And I miss my wife. I don't like sleeping alone. I miss brushing my teeth with my wife.
Brodetz, a nursing student, is not particularly religious and never supported any of the wars. Nearly a month after they were taken, he's not sure how to keep hope he'll ever see his family again. Daniele Hamamdjian, Global News, Jerusalem.
As we mentioned, some of the more than 500 Canadians in Gaza will be allowed to leave as early as Sunday. It has been weeks of uncertainty, desperation, and frustration for their family members here. Neetu Garcha reports.
They don't deserve to die as a collateral damage.
Omar Mansour is thankful his parents, brother, and 6 sisters are alive in Gaza, but he worries every moment of every day that could change.
They run out of all kind of water, any medical supplies or food supplies.
The Canadian permanent resident says this was the apartment where one of his sisters, her husband, and their 2 kids moved to in southern Gaza. They came here a few days into the conflict as Israel ordered people to move south. Mansour says the day they got here, they survived an airstrike which destroyed the neighborhood.
We've seen more bleeding coming through their nose because of all the chemicals of the bombings that is around them.
Since October 7th, Mansour says he has gone days without being able to reach his relatives. On Wednesday, he contacted his sister Ruba in southern Gaza, shortly after an airstrike nearby.
لا ولا واحد فينا تضرر ولا خبطها يعني نسي خبط واحد اللي طهينا
استلم المنطقة كلها مدفعية
وانا ذاتي مضعبهم عسكري.
We are under fire all the time.
Despite the spotty connection, we were able to speak with Mansour's uncle, who's an American citizen. He says he and his immediate family have traveled to Rafah crossing twice this week after getting conflicting information from the American embassy in Jerusalem.
No one is pushing for us to evacuate or to leave Gaza. As an American citizen, I need to know what's going on.
Mansour's immediate family are Gazan. He said he came to Canada nearly a decade ago in hopes of helping them.
I witnessed the 56 days war in 2014, which afterwards I decided to come and move to Canada for education. This is how skinny I was because I was no food for like 20 days.
And while he's now a world away, he has an idea of what they're going through.
When genocide happens, people understand that it's a genocide when it's too late. It's not too late to stop a genocide. You need to act right now.
Neetu Garcha, Global News, Vancouver.
While international attention has been focused in the Middle East, Russia launched a sprawling attack across Ukraine overnight, marking one of the most extensive rounds of shelling in the war so far this year. Firefighters worked to tame massive fires in Ukraine's second largest city of Kharkiv, one of the hardest hit in the overnight attacks. Drones are said to have struck residential buildings and key infrastructure, according to Kyiv. Ukrainian military officials say Russia has shelled nearly 120 cities and villages in the past 24 hours. The number of casualties in the attack is still unclear. Canada's defense minister is condemning what he calls unprofessional and unsafe acts by a Chinese warplane after it fired flares in front of a Canadian helicopter over international waters last weekend.
The helicopter pilot had to maneuver to avoid the flares and reduce the risk of ingesting a flare into the helicopter's rotor and intakes. These maneuvers put the safety of all personnel involved in unnecessary risk.
Bill Blair says the intercepts took place over the South China Sea while Canadian crews were conducting routine exercises. He's raised concerns with Beijing. China has drawn criticism not only from Canada, but the U.S., EU, and Japan, among others, for similar incidents in the past. In Ottawa, Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland spoke with her provincial and territorial counterparts today about Alberta's plan to exit the Canadian Pension Plan. Freeland once again warned about the potential consequences and complications if Alberta follows through with the idea. And as Mackenzie Gray reports, the federal government seeking more clarity over how much money Alberta is entitled to.
It's Ottawa's response to a potential pension split.
This has never happened before. That's why it's going to be really, really important to have a calm, fact-based conversation.
At the core of that conversation, how much the Alberta government could get from the Canada Pension Plan if it follows through in its pitch to start its own retirement fund. A report commissioned by Premier Danielle Smith says Alberta could get over $330 billion, but that figure is in dispute.
Do you think that is a realistic number that the pension plan could potentially have to give to Alberta if they left?
No, I do not.
To give a federal dollar figure, Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland announcing the chief federal actuary will review the pension legislation, which does allow any province to leave the fund. The Alberta Finance Minister promising that will only happen if Albertans vote to do so in a referendum. But the terms of a vote and numerous other issues like pension portability concerning Alberta businesses.
We can't risk that as a country. We need to be able to be competitive, and uncertainty does not keep us competitive. You are better off sharing risk with a bigger pool of capital than trying to go it alone.
But it's not just business groups in the federal government. Even Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre and NDP premiers don't want Alberta to leave the CPP.
We believe it's a good system. We think it's effective for British Columbians and for Canadians as a whole.
The other topic discussed at the virtual meeting, the carbon tax, with a number of provinces asking for additional carve-outs for different types of home heating fuel. But Chrystia Freeland says that topic will be discussed in December, Farah, the next time the finance ministers are scheduled to meet.
Okay, Mackenzie Gray in Ottawa. Thank you, Mackenzie. As Canada's unemployment rate rises, find out what the world's richest man thinks is going to happen with the rise of AI. That's coming up. For the fourth time in 6 months, Canada's unemployment rate rose as high interest rates increasingly weigh on the economy. Data from Statistics Canada shows unemployment ticked up to 5.7% in October. That's a 0.2% increase over the previous month, and it translates to more than 1.2 million unemployed people across the country. The softening job market has many economists predicting the Bank of Canada will likely continue a pause in raising its key lending rate, which sits at 5%. Controversial billionaire Elon Musk believes those job numbers won't matter in the near future as the use of artificial intelligence rises. Speaking to British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, Musk described the technology as the most disruptive force in history.
You can have a job if you want to have a job for sort of personal satisfaction, but the AI will be able to do everything.
Musk was attending the first AI Safety Summit hosted by the UK, aimed at managing the risks of technology. International leaders like the US Vice President, the European Union President, and the UN Secretary General also took part. Leading tech companies, including Microsoft and Meta, were also present. Record-breaking rainfall ahead, the muddy mess left behind in Italy by Storm Ciarán. At least 6 people have been killed in Italy's Tuscany region after record-breaking rainfall caused several rivers to burst their banks. Rescue workers paddled through flooded streets after Storm Ciarán hit the area overnight. It dumped nearly 200 millimeters of rainfall in a 3-hour period, forcing nearly 200 people out of their homes. The storm first swept across parts of Western Europe Thursday, killing 7 people there. Wind from the storm is also believed to have fueled this wildfire in eastern Spain. Some 2,000 hectares of land has been burned and at least 850 people have been forced out of their homes. The area is now bracing for incoming storm Domingos, which is expected to make landfall on Saturday. The push to produce renewable energy. Why a government decision could spell trouble for Alberta's efforts to go green. If Canada hopes to reach its climate goals in the coming years, renewable energy will need to play a major role. Wind and solar have become cost-effective and reliable sources of power, and for the better part of the last decade, Alberta has led the way. Heather Yorks West on a government decision that's putting it all at risk. Heather.
Known for its rich oil and gas resources, Alberta has been quietly fostering a renewable energy boom. That is until its government announced a 6-month pause in development earlier this year. But the players involved in this boom may surprise you. This massive wind farm near Medicine Hat was developed by the oil sands giant Suncor before being acquired by ATCO, a company synonymous with natural gas.
Yeah, we're pretty consistent with the schedule we laid out.
Located minutes from downtown Calgary, ATCO's newest solar project is almost ready to be electrified. The twin sites at Deerfoot and Barlow, set to produce enough power to light up 18,000 homes, are part of the company's rapidly expanding renewable energy portfolio.
Over the course of time, it'll be a multi-billion-dollar investment here in the province and in Canada.
And ATCO is not alone. In fact, over the last decade, Alberta has seen a renewable energy boom.
We have some of the best wind and also some of the best sun in parts of the province, and then also that competitive market.
That competitive market, unlike any other place in Canada, meant investors could come in, set up projects, and sell electricity into the grid. But then, this past August, Alberta's government hit the brakes.
If we're going to bring on solar and wind, we have to do it responsibly.
Citing concerns with grid stability and whether projects were taking over too much of Alberta's agricultural lands, the province announced no new projects would be approved for 6 months, taking the industry completely by surprise and introducing market uncertainty.
So even if we get through this period now, the question becomes, what might this government do in the future around renewable energy?
There's much more to this story than meets the eye, and even then, the path forward is anything but clear. Farah?
Heather Eriks West in 40 Mile County, Alberta. Thanks, Heather. And you can watch Heather's full story on Alberta's renewable energy boom and bust tomorrow night at 7 on The New Reality right here on Global. And that is Global National for this Friday night. I'm Farah Nasser, and on behalf of our whole crew here, I want to thank you so much for spending part of your evening with us. Tonight's Your Canada is majestic Croker Bay in Lancaster Sound, Nunavut. We love seeing your Canada, so please keep emailing us your photos to viewers@globalnational.com. Until tomorrow, take care of yourselves and take care of each other. Good night.